How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to Set 6, and today we're going to be talking about the many worlds of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. We're going to be deep diving into them, we're going to be cataloguing them, and we're going to be talking about some of the stuff that we get from the Ultimania as well. We're going in, so sit back, buckle up, and enjoy the ride. Also, as a quick side point, all of the translation information today has come from Shinra Archaeology Department. I will make sure that their links are in the description of the video, so please go over there, check them out, give them some support. And a huge thank you to them again for the translation. Please do hit the like button and subscribe for future content. We've got loads more videos coming up in the future. But let's get straight into this, because it could be a long one. Also, spoilers. I'm going to keep mentioning this in videos for probably at least the next month, but really, if you come in to watch a video like this, you should know that there's going to be full spoilers for Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. So if you've not finished, or if you are avoiding spoilers, this is not the video for you. Not yet, at least. Make sure you come back. But now we'll get on with it. In Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, we finally get some understanding of just what is going on with fate, destiny, time, and reality. And I do say some understanding, because it's still quite a confusing topic to dive into and discuss, and there's still a variety of possibilities for the direction that this could take. In-game, Sephiroth explains to us that when the boundaries of fate and destiny are breached, new worlds are born, referring to this as the true nature of reality. And we've seen these worlds as we progress through Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, mainly the world created at the end of Final Fantasy VII Remake, where we see Zack survives, Biggs survives, and the sky is tearing itself apart seemingly, a harbinger of this world's doom. We see a shot in the background of two of these worlds seeming to merge with each other, and eventually Sephiroth does begin to speak about a reunion, the merging of worlds, where all worlds become one with the planet, a homecoming. We also see a shot of Cloud in a black cloak, something that we've seen previously in trailers, but this has got a very interesting suggestion here. Is this suggesting that the world where Cloud is wearing the black cloak already exists? And this brings up some interesting thoughts regarding the worlds of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth and their interactions not only with fate and destiny, but with time. Are we seeing a moment in the future? Are we seeing a projected future? Are we seeing a world where this has already happened and Cloud has already broken? Or is it just Sephiroth messing with Cloud's head? It's more than likely the latter, but it's something that gets me thinking not just about the variety of the worlds that we see, but how time seems to become irrelevant when you think about the worlds and dive into it. Characters talk about how the passage of time, the flow of time, feels broken to them and they've got no grasp on it. We also have moments in Remake where we see future events. We have moments in Rebirth where we see future events. It could well be that because certain characters have passed from real world, which is a term I'm loath to use but we'll get into that later, into the life streams worlds, and therefore maybe some sort of an afterlife, that's broken the concept of time for them. But it could also just be that transferring between worlds in and of itself skews a person's perspective of time, as these worlds could seemingly exist in varied time frames. Zack's survival being a prime example of time being breached. It could well be that if someone is plucked from one time frame and dropped into another in a different world, then that is the thing that maybe breaks their grasp on the flow of time. But then I suppose the question becomes, how does time generally work in Final Fantasy VII? And this is something that we'll look at in a separate video. It's almost certainly going to be me going too deep though, and I don't know if it's something that's really going to stand up and be an important part of things. We'll look into it in a separate video, but we're going to stick with the worlds predominantly for this one. So after this, Sephiroth has explained the worlds, and we've seen the variety of worlds in Rebirth, and the story continues. But I think at this point we need to stop and take a look at the worlds that we definitely have, and the worlds that we might have. In the Ultimania, they say at least 5 of these worlds described by Sephiroth appear, suggesting that we may have seen more in-game without realising it, because why say at least? You would say 5 of these worlds appear. And this brings me back to the point that I made about seeing Cloud earlier. There may be others though, and we'll get to them in time. The first world that we have is the Beagle world. where the main party are, and where Rebirth takes place. I have my own thoughts on this world and we'll circle back around to it later on, but this is the main world from the perspective of the characters. Then we have the Terrier world, which is the world where Zack and Biggs survive, with unconscious copies of Cloud and Aerith, and it's also where the white materia is. This is also the same world where Zack heads to the Shinra building to meet Hojo, and seemingly meets his end in this world's continuity. Once Zack arrives at the Shinra building, the details of the world seem to change a little bit. It may be nothing, everything seems quite dark though, there's no lighting going on in the background. The only real focus is Zack, the Shinra troopers, which is something that keeps popping up for Zack, gotta love that, and the depiction of the stamp in the background, which is the Terrier. Every other detail seems to be diminished, and maybe that's because from the perspective of the person that world seems to be focused on, which is Zack, they aren't particularly important, and this is something that we'll flesh out later on in the video. Then we have the Pug world, which is a world where Zack heads off to see Biggs instead, a world that we see created as a reaction to Zack's choice in the subway, where he heads to see Hojo. This in itself shows that alternate choices play out still, and obviously the Pug is by far the best of the stamps. By far. In this world, Biggs is killed, and then Zack seemingly jumps down into an empty Mako pool at the bottom of the Sector 6 reactor in an attempt to escape from Shinra troopers who've popped up again. This, I would guess, leads to the doom of Zack, but we're not too sure. Again, we're not too sure with either of them, the Shinra building Zack or this Zack, the Pug Zack or the Terrier Zack. We don't know exactly what goes down with either of them, but we can assume it doesn't go well. The next world that we see is the Corgi world, and in this world Zack has instead chosen to go to the church while he struggles over the choices that he has. Sephiroth appears at this point, and before entering the church, he seems to expel Zack into a space between the worlds. And last but not least of the 5 worlds that we've definitely seen, we have the Chihuahua world. Now this is the world where we see Aerith and Cloud go for a stroll, before eventually being found by Sephiroth at the church. Aerith then pushes Cloud out of this world with the white materia, and seemingly pushes him into the same space between worlds that Zack gets pushed to. Sephiroth then chooses to hijack this moment to show Cloud the nature of the worlds as we discussed earlier. Now this world's a bit of an odd one, as it seems to be a direct connection with the Terrier world, but then at the same time it doesn't. The same shopkeepers are all about offering items, one per person, the same as they do previously. The same belief of the world's inevitable destruction exists here in this world as well, and I'm getting this information from chapters that we have with Zack, where Zack runs through the area, and we see these shopkeepers there, people are talking about the end of the world, so it's a very similar setup. But the difference is we see no Elmira, we see no Marlene, we see no Zack. We also see, entering the church at the end of this world, is what I believe is the Sephiroth from the Corgi world who attacked Zack. This suggests to me that Sephiroth is potentially acting across all of these worlds at once, or that the connection between the Chihuahua and Terrier, or Chihuahua and Corgi, or maybe even all of these worlds is very strong, and somehow that allows him to observe these worlds all at the same time. I'm not too sure, but there's something going on there. But I don't think these are the only worlds that we see. We definitely see the Edge of Creation location from Remake again, Creation location. This could be classed as a world. At the very least it's a spot between the worlds, fueled and maintained possibly as a spot for Sephiroth to act from, possibly as a spot that represents the tether between Cloud and Sephiroth, something that Sephiroth requires to persist after the OG. It could also be some sort of internal place that's relative to Cloud, and this is still a very strong possibility. And that makes it less of a world and more of a spot where the struggle for Cloud's soul continues, and tying in with one of the earlier bits where Zack's choices and Zack's hopes and Zack's dreams seem to be creating these locations. Cloud and Sephiroth and this tether between the two seems to have done the same here, and we will come back to this. I personally think it's kind of a mix of option 2 and 3, which will feed into what we're going to talk about shortly. But it is a very fluid location with a lot of weirdness to it, the Edge of Creation, so I'm not necessarily going to sit here and say, oh, that's a world. It's possible, though. Next up, we see the church location that seems to be hovering in the middle of nothingness, where Zack and Sephiroth Reborn do battle, and eventually where we see Zack kind of waiting for his oblivion. But again, I don't think this is a world. I think this is more of a safe space that Aerith creates in the moment. We then see where Zack arrives at the very end of the game, and there's a lot of possibilities for where he is right now. All of these possibilities are equally possible because there was not really any imagery that kind of suggested anything. The only real imagery that could be used to suggest anything is the flowers and the fact that they're all blooming. That could suggest that he is in a world where everything's kind of fine and the live stream's still alive and the world not close to dying, which could be the Beagle world, but given what we see in the Beagle world at the end, maybe not. But he seems to be somewhere safe at the very least. Is this a world? I would say so. But it could very well be one of the worlds that we've already seen, so might not be a new one. We also see the realm where the Gi exist, and again, this could be a world, as we see similar imagery when we're travelling there, but the coloration of like the rainbow effect is slightly different to the one that we see when we transfer between the worlds normally. Like when we transfer normally it's a very rainbow effect, whereas this one it's more like dark reds and blues and purples. It's similar though. But they are not the only possibilities. The first is the images that we see of Cloud already wearing the black cloak, heading to the reunion. This could be another world, but could also just as easily be Sephiroth messing with Cloud. So I'm unsure on this one, let me know what you're thinking, as the concept of time in Rebirth is something that I may look into like we were discussing earlier. But then the other big possibility is the world that we see created possibly when Cloud attempts to stop Sephiroth. We see both series of events play out, with both Cloud succeeding in saving Aerith and Cloud failing to save Aerith. Now, for me, there's no doubt that in the Beagle timeline, Cloud failed. But, as we've seen with Zack, alternate choices and possibilities play out, no matter how brief of a time that they exist for. So there is a possibility that there's a world where Aerith survives in my mind. I think that could be what Cloud keeps seeing at the end of Rebirth, with some potential overlap between the worlds due to the fact that Cloud has travelled between them a few times at this point, so his perspective is different to everybody else's. So for me, that's the possibility of another world created, a world where Aerith survives. But then the question becomes, how real are these worlds? Any of them? We could assume that the Beagle world is the only real world, with the others being echoes of people's hopes and dreams in the live stream. That seems to be a big suggestion in the game. And this does feed into comments in the Ultimania made by Najima, where he talks about looking into things like Yogacara Buddhism, I've probably just butchered the pronunciation of that, I apologise, and Jung's theory of collective unconscious. Now, I don't have the biggest grasps on these theories, these are things that I've looked into recently, but in the most basic term that I can understand and explain them, Yogacara Buddhism it's a way of thinking which essentially suggests that everything that we experience, reality itself, is a mental construct, formulated by the consciousness. Nothing is really real, but at the same time everything is real, because it all comes down to the perception of the observer, and that is what forms the world around them. Moving on from that, Jung's theory of collective unconscious suggests that all human beings possess a collective unconscious which is a genetically inherited portion of our personalities. It suggests that things like phobias and things like that we establish when we're young are things that are passed down to us genetically. Fear of the dark, survival instincts, things like that. Now these traits can manifest in archetypes and in dreams according to this theory, and that due to certain archetypes that are discussed in the theory overall, which I'm not going to dive into just yet, but because of them, imagery in dreams and certain symbols are universal. And also these dreams can be used to play out parts of our psyche that don't get the chance to shine in our real lives. So between these two theories, both of which I'm going to dive into a lot more over the next month or two, and come back with something a little bit more in depth, but both of these things suggest that the worlds that we see in Rebirth could very well be manifestations of the hopes and dreams of characters as they return to the live stream. Which you would think means that they're less than real, right? But then we also have the suggestion that each of these worlds are potentially just as real as any other world, as the perspective and consciousness of the observer is the thing that creates reality. And this is very much along the lines of what I was already thinking. We have all these worlds that exist within the live stream, all of which are the creation of consciousnesses breaking the boundaries of fate and destiny. But due to the fact that these worlds exist as part of the live stream, including the real world, whether that's the Beagle world or not, each and every one of these worlds can be viewed as real. And this is why things like the white materia, consciousnesses, cloud, are all able to pass in between these worlds, because they are essentially all real. And this thought invokes one more theory, which is the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics. Briefly, this theory states that all possible outcomes of quantum measurements equally exist and play out in some reality, which in turn, if you scale it up, suggests that there may well be an infinite number of worlds or universes where each potential outcome plays out, all existing at the same time, all separated from each other, but all real. And the scenes where we see Zack choose to go one way, but then simultaneously we see him doing two other things, going to see Biggs and sitting outside the church, suggest that this theory may also have some kind of relevance when looking at the story of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. So a lot of interesting stuff in there that I'm going to be looking into in greater deal over the coming months. Like I say, I don't want to rush into some big deep exploration when I only really have a loose understanding of some of these concepts. But let's always remember that these concepts are going to be used as inspiration. They're almost certainly not going to be directly lifted and implemented into the game's narrative. So expecting things to line up nicely and exactly as these concepts suggest could be detrimental, but they definitely need to be used as a framework for the analysis of the story. But let's wrap this up with a final thought. In a system of worlds where the live stream is the core connecting factor, and all of these worlds are connected in the same way, can you really class any of these worlds as more real than the others? All of these worlds that are described in the Ultimania as a little bit different from the concept of so-called parallel worlds exist within the live stream, branch off from each other, and then eventually rejoin. Two of the worlds that we saw, the Terrier and the Chihuahua, had a massive tear in the sky, with everyone talking about this world being close to its end. And we assumed this to be because both of these worlds are branches off from the Beagle world. But now, in what we can still assume to be the Beagle world, we see a tear in the sky. Something that may have appeared due to us getting closer to Meteor being summoned and the potential end of this world. But what if it also suggests something else? What if this Beagle timeline broke off from another at some point, and now events are pushing it closer to its end and re-merging with its source? A reunion. If that's the case, my thought immediately becomes the OG world. Like I say, this isn't definite or guaranteed. The tear in the sky could be due to other events going on in the live stream that we haven't been made aware of. It could be due to a massive number of worlds forming and ending recently. It could even just be Broken Cloud being messed with even further. Note that he only notices the tear in the sky after rediscovering the black materia. So it's a possibility this could just be an illusion, or if not that, just an indicator of Cloud's extremely diminished mental state. And as a final thought, is this the end of the multiverse theory that a lot of us have kind of stuck with since day one? Not really. I'd say if anything, it's a confirmation. It's kind of a merging of the two theories. You've got the more spiritual side of things, but then you've got the more scientific side of things where all of these different possibilities are being played out. I think it's a combination of the two, personally. It seems like it confirms a lot of things, but it also adds a more spiritual layer that ties in with the live stream and the concept of memories and consciousness being a massive part of the live stream. I think it works. I think it kind of weaves the two concepts together quite nicely so far. Remains to be seen if that's going to be the way it pans out in Part 3. But either way, the worlds of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth still hold many secrets for us to uncover. And I'm going to be here, ready to unearth them. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget, like the video, subscribe for future content, and share the video. Let's get people watching, let's get people involved in the channel. But more importantly than all of that, have a great day.